Does that help Tesla? I mean, you had Tim Waltz, who's a huge jerk, right? You know.
What if I told you that there was a cataclysmic event in the world of technology that changed everything? A catastrophe that overshadowed the financial markets and shocked everyone who ever believed in the unquestionable success of one of the most famous companies on the planet. What if you were told that Tesla lost more than $146 billion of its market value in a matter of days, and its future was jeopardized not because of competition, but because of a strange and powerful strike from two allies? Sounds like a script for a Hollywood movie, doesn't it? But it's not fiction, it's reality, and it started with a single decision.
Teslas are being torched across the country. Dealerships shot up and set on fire. Spray paint to vandalize and make a statement. People in Southern California are getting notes on their Teslas, calling them complicit Nazis for owning electric cars.
Canada and Mexico, two major partners of the US, suddenly declared war on Tesla and its founder Elon Musk. And it all happened with no warnings, no negotiations, no prior statements, simply economic destruction. In one day, without further ado, decisions were made that changed the electric car market and challenged Tesla's global dominance. But why did this happen? What caused such a blowback? And how did Tesla find itself at the center of an international economic conflict that could destroy its image and put tens of thousands of workers out of work?
Outperforming as well in some cases, doing better than Tesla. And you just have to think, how much more is this a sustained issue for Tesla going forward, given the fact that you have Elon Musk, who's been very forthright in his opinions, particularly weighing in on politics, particularly in Europe. We've just had the European elections, which Musk has been very focused on. But across the piece, when you look at the performance for Tesla in Europe, it's not just in small countries. There are a lot of countries where Tesla has been performing badly, including in Germany, in the UK, where it has been lagging, and Spain as well.
Many people are already hearing about it, but what's really behind this economic apocalypse? Why did Canada decide to impose 100% tariffs on all Teslas, literally doubling the price of the cars? Why was a strategic agreement with Musk's company that could have brought high-speed internet to the most remote corners of the country torn up? And why did Mexico also decide to strike Tesla by blocking key components for production? These questions aren't just important, they will determine the future of Tesla and possibly the entire electric car industry. Losing $146 billion isn't just numbers on a screen. It's the destruction of the entire business model that Elon Musk has spent so long building. A moment when his company faces an incredible challenge from which it may not recover. But what comes next? How will the company whose cars could be considered synonymous with progress deal with such a blow?
KTLA Samantha Cortese joins us live with more on the wave of vandalism in protest of Elon Musk and his role in Washington. Sam?
Hi, Sharon, Micah. The ATF and FBI are collaborating with federal, state, and local law enforcement to investigate acts of domestic terrorism surrounding Teslas.
In this video, we will reveal to you the secrets and details of this shocking conflict that has shaken the entire industry. What's behind this international feud and why it could be a disaster not only for Tesla, but for the entire electric car market? Are you ready to find out how one economic maneuver can change the course of history? Stay tuned, because this is just the beginning. Tesla, once a symbol of progress, has become the target of international fury, facing attacks that have jeopardized its financial future and overshadowed its previous achievements. It all started with a simple move: President Trump's announcement that he planned to buy Tesla after the company's stock began to plummet. However, in reality, the stock drop masked much more serious economic maneuvers that were cooked up by its continental neighbors, Canada and Mexico. They didn't just limit Tesla's opportunities in their markets, they effectively destroyed it, dealing a blow that many economists have called an invisible knife to the tech industry. In Canada alone, the market lost more than $66 billion, and the global economic impact shook financial markets around the world.
I mean, the things that he's doing is not trying to make America better. He's ruining our infrastructure, every department in our government he's ruining, and he's right now destroying our economy. He's taken away all of our allies. We're a pariah in the world.
The day Canada announced 100% tariffs on all Tesla vehicles was a nightmare for the company. In an instant, the cost of the Model Y, one of the company's most popular electric cars, doubled. As a result of this move, customers lost interest in buying cars and dealerships were in a panic. There were no warnings, no negotiations, no official statements, just a paper signed by the government and a decision that turned the market upside down. For a country that had enjoyed a close economic relationship with Tesla for years, it was an unexpected and extremely painful move. It was more than just an economic decision. It was a political blow against the ambitions of Musk and his company.
Canada, the largest supplier of steel to the U.S., slapping new tariffs on $20 billion worth of U.S. goods that are sold in Canada. And the 27 countries of the European Union imposing retaliatory tariffs on up to $28 billion worth of U.S. goods sold in Europe, including Harley-Davidson motorcycles and Kentucky bourbon. President Trump with the Irish Prime Minister visiting the White House today. The president suggesting his tariffs won't stop here, saying, "Of course, I'm going to respond." And tonight, right here, the new poll showing 56% of Americans disapprove of President Trump's handling of the economy. The number's even worse now on the president's tariffs.
Tesla's unexpected death in the Canadian market also had a devastating impact on its most important project, the Starlink satellite network designed to provide high-speed internet to remote and hard-to-reach regions of the country. The Canadian government cancelled a contract with the company, which was designed to bring internet access to the most remote parts of the country. Tearing up this agreement was not just a business decision, it was a signal that the political situation between Canada and the US went beyond economic cooperation. A strategic arrangement that promised improved connectivity and access to education and medicine in hard-to-reach areas had been destroyed by political maneuvering. In 1 minute, Canada showed the world that it would no longer support a corporation that it believed had acted to the detriment of its economic security and sovereignty.
Hey Diane, this investigation really just beginning, and one of the key elements will of course be the surveillance video, and investigators potentially have a lot of it to work with as they try to figure out what caused this fire. We know that surveillance footage has been turned over, including video from each of the cars, which could prove vital to understanding what happened here, because each vehicle has its own camera system that works even when the car is off, and 16 cars burned in this fire. And right now, investigators don't know what caused it.
Amid this political gesture, with public attention focused on Musk and his company's response, Mexico made its move. Without much fuss, press conferences or statements, Mexican authorities began blocking shipments of key components for the production of Tesla cars. Batteries, sensors, electronic modules, everything needed to assemble the cars was suspended. Difficulties with the import of these components led to the fact that many Tesla plants in the US, in Texas and California, were on the verge of shutdown. Conveyors froze, workers were unable to perform their duties, and production lines were idled. For a company that relied on vertical integration and having all components under control, it was a total collapse. Mexico, for its part, didn't just halt shipments, it forged new trade ties with China and the European Union, giving those regions priority when it came to sourcing high-quality auto components. These economic blows were not only the result of political infighting, but ultimately showed how thin the line between success and failure can be in global business. Mexico, by refusing to supply the US, effectively accused the Trump government of creating a trade war that could destroy not only US companies, but also ruin ties with crucial partners in North and South America. It was a stiff reminder that corporations like Tesla depend not only on the strength of their products, but also on political stability in the countries with which they do business.
We begin with the president's trade war escalating tonight. This evening, the retaliation against the United States, Canada, and the European Union responding quickly, just hours after President Trump's 25% tariff on all steel and aluminum coming into the United States.
But Mexico's blowback wasn't the only one. The moment Canadian authorities decided on the economic blockade, a global backlash began in the midst of these global tensions that put both countries in the crosshairs. Authorities in various Canadian provinces began to take their own steps. British Columbia, one of the country's most powerful economic units, soon announced that it would no longer support Tesla through subsidy programs for the purchase of electric cars. These subsidies, which could reach up to $5,000 per car, made buying a Tesla affordable for the middle class. But now, with the elimination of these incentives, there weren't as many buyers anymore. The move was another political message against the American company, which seemed to signal the beginning of Tesla's gradual isolation from the market that was so important to it.
So there are a couple of things that might be going on here. So on the one hand, it could be that just at a very basic level, Musk has quickly observed a 40% decline in sales in Tesla in Europe.
Thus, Tesla's downfall was not an accident. It was the result of coordinated political actions between the two countries, supported by domestic economic fluctuations and doubts among consumers. A company that was until recently a model of success for the world has found itself at the center of an economic and political storm, the effects of which will be felt on many levels. The Canadian and Mexican authorities have shown that it is not only tax revenues that matter to them, but also economic independence from global corporations that sometimes undermine local markets and threaten national sovereignty.
But they are not ruling out the possibility that this was arson. At the same time, as you just mentioned, there are groups that have been organizing ongoing and peaceful protests at Tesla dealerships around the world. These demonstrations targeting Elon Musk and his affiliation with the Trump administration. Also, Italy's prime minister is said to be close friends with Musk, and there were reports that Teslas have been vandalized in her hometown in Italy. Diane.
When the moment came when this entire chain of economic attacks began to lead to imminent consequences, Mexico's actions continued a series of catastrophic blows to Tesla, tearing apart its already fragile supply chain and manufacturing processes. Interrupting the supply of components such as batteries, sensors, and electronic modules from Mexico to the US has been a real disaster for the company. First of all, for Tesla, which had built its business model on vertical integration, it was a real shock. The company, which had built its reputation by adapting quickly and maximizing the integration of all processes internally, was now faced with a system that was destroying itself. Deliveries that had previously been running smoothly were suddenly suspended at the border, and assembly lines in Texas and California were forced to stop.
Well, you will hear people over in Europe say the new Model Y, the Juniper, could be a difference maker, but that's been in that market now for more than a month. And you would think that you would see a greater snapback if it's going to be a difference maker. Look, we could be wrong. It could be a difference maker once you get the sales for April, May, and June. But when you have a country like Norway, I think the sales were down something like 11% there. I mean, that's a very savvy EV consumer in Norway. And that's long been a strength for Tesla. Very small market, not huge volume, but I think almost all of the vehicles they sell there are electric. And they embraced Tesla long before others. And, you know, the reports there are not encouraging.
The situation quickly became critical. Tesla's internal reports showed that there was only enough inventory of critical components, such as batteries and sensors, to last a few weeks. In response, the company's management began urgently seeking alternative suppliers, but it turned out that many of them had already reallocated their resources to new partners, such as Chinese and European companies, which eventually became Mexico's priority. This wasn't just a blow to logistics, it was an economic manifesto that called Tesla's entire business model into question. How can one survive when key supplies from a neighboring country are cut off in the blink of an eye and replaced by new partners willing to provide the necessary components for competitors on favorable terms? This was not only a logistical problem, but also a serious threat to Tesla's entire manufacturing strategy, which in a moment was vulnerable to global political tensions.
Running around on stage with the Tesla stock price, where the stock price had gone in half. And he was overjoyed. What an evil thing to do. What a creep, what a jerk. Like who derives joy?
At the moment Tesla was looking for a way out, equally serious problems began to arise within the company itself. The internal rebellion was no less devastating than the external blows. Confrontations with authorities in Canada and Mexico left Tesla with no choice. It had to respond to the challenges and perhaps even rethink its business model. But the internal struggle for the company's survival in the crisis did not last long. Finding himself under pressure, Musk and his top managers began to face a rising tide of discontent within the company. Amid the uncertainty, with factories shut down and deliveries interrupted, Tesla employees began to leave the company en masse. Layoffs and job transfers to competing companies became a veritable plague for Tesla in 2024. It wasn't just the loss of key personnel, it was the result of a deep moral and emotional crisis caused by constant stress and pressures from a management team that couldn't offer its team stability in a crisis. Engineers, designers, programmers, all those who had previously helped Tesla become the leading electric car company now sought refuge with competitors. Rivian, Lucid Motors, Bide and Hyundai took advantage of the situation and began actively recruiting departing employees, promising them higher salaries, better working conditions, and most importantly, no interference with personal political beliefs. At that moment, many of these employees, who were used to working with an ambitious and often eccentric manager, realized that the situation had gone beyond the usual corporate struggle for survival. It had become a war for moral and professional principles.
And police in Italy are investigating possible arson after a fire destroyed more than a dozen Tesla vehicles. Elon Musk is calling the incident at a Rome dealership terrorism. This comes as Tesla has been the target of recent protests around the world.
In addition, the growing stream of layoffs and departures from the company was creating another problem: a break in the chain of development of new models and technologies. Development of new batteries, improvements to autopilot and autonomous systems, and the transition to new production facilities were all frozen or severely delayed. Only those who couldn't afford to leave for other companies remained in their jobs. But these were usually employees whose skills and ideas were not related to innovation. This meant that Tesla risked not only a supply stalemate, but also a human resources crisis that jeopardized the entire production of future generations of cars. The situation was further exacerbated by the fact that amidst the political pressure and economic isolation of Tesla from North American markets, other major players such as Volkswagen, Hyundai, and especially Chinese companies began to fill the vacuum that had been created in the electric car market. These companies ramped up their production and attracted the attention of investors, who now wondered whether it was worth investing in a company whose future now depended not only on political and economic decisions, but also on the ability of its management to survive in the new global reality.
Tesla is a peaceful company. We've never done anything harmful. I've never done anything harmful. I've only done productive things. So I think we just have a deranged, there's some kind of mental illness thing going on here, because this doesn't make any sense.
In turn, the political situation, particularly the interference of Canada and Mexico, continued to be a key factor influencing all of Tesla's future moves. Every day the company spent trying to restore production and rebuild its supply chain became more and more difficult for it. The external threat in the form of tariffs and supply lockout was not the only problem. Internal discontent and staff leakage from the company exacerbated the situation, making it almost unmanageable. Tesla fell victim not only to external pressures, but also to internal crises that became increasingly painful and disruptive as the problems worsened.
A 371, most were saying 350 to 360. Now they're coming in at 336,068, production of 362,615. So for some point of reference here, you're going back to Q2, maybe Q1 of 2022 in terms of the last time that they had production this or deliveries this low for one quarter. So again, Tesla deliveries worse than expected at just over 336,000 deliveries in the first quarter. Guys, I'll send it back to you.
That's horrible. Can I just ask you, Phil, how about the Cybertruck? How's that doing? You got a little inventory there in the Cybertruck?
These supply problems and the loss of key employees were the main reasons Tesla was on the brink of disaster, struggling to maintain its position on the global stage. Without key supplies, with declining production capacity and growing moral decay within the company, Tesla was experiencing moments that could be the beginning of its end. The question now facing Musk and his team was more than just economic. Could this crisis have been too big a blow to the company from which it would never recover? Amid Tesla's plummeting stock and continued pressure from Canada and Mexico, one of the biggest threats to the company had become not only external but internal. The financial disaster and political isolation had an immediate impact on the market and destroyed not only the company's reputation, but also its financial model. Just weeks after the tariffs were imposed, Tesla's stock plummeted 30%, and large institutional investors like Vanguard and BlackRock began selling their shares en masse. They weren't just reacting to the stock drop, their actions were part of a broader strategy to exit a company that was perceived as toxic and unstable. All of this was accompanied by a drop in confidence among investors, which only exacerbated the crisis. As Musk and his team tried to stabilize the situation, reports of growing panic among shareholders began to come in. A source at Tesla said that within days there had been a record drain of investors from the stock market as more and more major players began to realize that Tesla was no longer a safe investment.
Worse than expected, 336 and 68 vehicles, 336,068 vehicles delivered in the first quarter for Tesla. For a point of reference, the street was expecting, the street account was expecting based on analyst expectations.
Meanwhile, the failures in North America began to grow into a global problem. Europe, previously considered Tesla's most important market, was also beginning to put pressure on the company. Old key partnerships with European nations that had supported the transportation electrification initiative began to crumble. In Germany, for example, demand for Tesla dropped by 70%. The reason for this was not only the slowdown in production, but also the political polarization associated with Musk's stated political commitment to conservative ideas. His public statements of support for right-wing political forces did not go unnoticed and led to Tesla being the target of a boycott in some countries. Germany and the UK even began to withdraw subsidies for the purchase of Tesla electric cars en masse, and various regional governments began to renege on previous agreements to subsidize the brand. As a result, the demand for Tesla cars in Europe has shrunk, and the company is facing the threat of closing several of its plants. All these difficulties have led to a threat to Tesla's entire business model. With internal instability, external isolation, and growing political and economic barriers, the company found itself in a precarious situation where its future depended not only on external factors, but also on the ability of Musk and his team to make strategically sound decisions. However, the pressure was increasing by the day. Funding reserves were dwindling and credit lines were beginning to freeze. Meanwhile, competitors wasted no time. They were building up their positions, ensuring their victory in the market. Despite all this, Musk and his team didn't give up. Instead of shutting themselves in their fortress, they started looking for solutions and connections on other continents. South Korea, Japan, and China were the countries that Tesla tried to forge new trade ties with. However, it was obvious that it would be extremely difficult to restore the company to its former glory. The whole situation with Tesla began to resemble a crisis that was not just economic, but also cultural. The question was not only about financial survival, but also about the cultural and political identity of the company itself. But until the end of 2025, the answer to this question remained unclear. Would Tesla be able to return to its former heights? Or would its decline become an eternal symbol of political and economic isolation?